get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Stewart Gandolf of HealthcareSuccess.com. And Stewart, before I formally introduce you, I won't make you play the guitar behind you, but I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. And since this is part of the Top Agency series, I did a couple episodes with Jason Swank, who grew his agency to over 8 figures and sold it. And then now he's been buying up agencies. So those are interesting episodes. I had Todd Taskey, who runs the Second Bite podcast, and he talks about how he pairs agencies with private equity and helps sell agencies. And sometimes they make more on the second bite than the first. So he's talking deep on valuation, everything like that. And there's another one I geek out on, which is Adee Clevitt. We talked about, she does SOPs for companies, and we talked about all our favorite productivity software tools and everything like that. And we shared all of those. So check those out and more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do strategy, accountability, and the full execution. Stewart, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company.
I use that same metaphor. That's really funny.
You're like the magic elves for healthcare companies. I know. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Stewart Gandolf. He has built his agency since 2006. He has over 28 years of experience in marketing. We're going to dig into that. And today he leads a healthcare marketing agency, like I mentioned, at healthcaresuccess.com. Their agency specializes in healthcare marketing, medical advertising. They focus on delivering patients, influencing doctors, building brands, and ultimately generating ROI. And they work with doctors, hospitals, manufacturers, pharmaceuticals, and other healthcare clients. They also have free information. They practice what they preach. You can go to healthcaresuccess.com. They have a blog. I think they have over 20,000 subscribers there that, tune in. So, Stewart, thanks for joining me.
Hey, glad to be here. Awesome. And I love the elf. The elf analogy is awesome. My former roommate used to tell the other roommate, elves don't clean up after you. I clean up. That's been a Stewartism for years. I've never heard anybody else say about magic elves. I use the exact same one.
Awesome. So tell people a little bit more about healthcare success and what you do.
You actually did a pretty good synopsis there. So we're a national company. We've got about 40 people on our team. I love doing what we do. We're absolutely expert at what we do. And I guess the one thing I would say is that makes us maybe a little unique. There are really certainly today a lot of good digital agencies. There's a bunch out there. There is a lot of good branding agencies. There's a lot out there. There are companies that focus on healthcare. It's really rare doing all three in the same place. So there are people that, everybody says they're integrated, but usually they may have outsourced their digital, or they have freelancers for the creative or whatever. So it's not easy. It's taken me 17 years to get to this stage where we really have process experts at each of those things. So our sort of playground is healthcare, but our approach is to bring a truly integrated team. Again, I'm not saying anything disrespectful to my agency colleagues. It's just most of them would recognize it's hard because being good at digital is really hard. Good digital people want to be with other good digital people. And getting good branders to want to play on that party is hard to find. So finally, it's taken us a long time.
I want to talk about the evolution of the agency a little bit, but
Sure.
Talk about the niche and how you fell into healthcare.
Sure. So actually, fun fact, I thought I was going to be an engineer, and I also passed on being an attorney, which in retrospect, that would have been fun. I think I would have been a better attorney than engineer, but I'm a creative person as well. And so the creative side of me won out. And so while I'm still pretty analytical, or at least have that in me, it's buried somewhere now, but it's much more creative. I worked my way from a little marketing company in San Diego right after graduation. I moved to as far away from Ohio as I could find and went to San Diego, and I worked on client side for about 4 years. In that case, I learned about direct response, which was, up and coming at the time. I worked with a lot of big banks on a lot of big direct response campaigns.
Yeah, I saw, 1-800 workout, 1-800 fitness,
Oh, you
share,
did do
Heather
your homework.
Locklear.
Well, I'm proud of you. You did do your homework. Yeah. So we worked on with Jay Walter. I was in charge of direct response. I migrated up to LA. That was the big time. And at that time, we were working on what became Bally's Total Fitness. And our spokespeople were Heather Locklear, Cher, and Sheena Easton. And those were huge, huge names back then. And yeah, I came up with an idea of 1-800 workout, which became a massive asset for my client. And I always joke, like, I didn't get a thank you note for that either. But that was my idea. We had 1-800 fitness, 1-800 workout. They found out how to acquire them. They were just owned by some in a random pool of numbers. And
So you had the idea, and then you basically went out to help them acquire those numbers. Like someone owned it.
yeah,
they
what
weren't
happened
using
there?
it.
Yeah, in the marketplace, vanity numbers is a thing now. Back then, it wasn't. Like, there weren't that many vanity numbers. So basically, what was happening there, since you asked, we were spending about $500,000 a year doing editing for. We did a lot of direct response TV, and so if they showed a Dallas club, they had like 11 Dallas phone numbers. Like asking a consumer to sort through which of those local clubs they want to dial is insane. So as a horrible, didn't use the word back then, user experience, but it also is incredibly expensive for editing. So I'm like, why don't we just come up with a vanity number like 1-800? And I just played with net lines, 1-800 workout, 1-800 fitness. I actually gave them 4 or 5 other ones. And then this is before I knew this was possible. I go, well, then when they get the calls, they probably should be able to find some technology where they put their zip code in and get routed to a local club. So the client did all the legwork, but they figured it out. But the idea was mine, and it became a case history apparently later, because it was, think about all the money we saved with the editing and also just the user experience. Plus, vanity numbers have their own value, right? Because
It's like a high level domain name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Like, 100 Dentist is, a many, many $1 million a year company based upon a name, even in the internet age. So that's fun. I haven't talked about that for a while. So that was a fun fact. And then, and that was a big account. That was in LA back in the 90s. It was $80 million. There's not many accounts that are $80 million today, let alone in the 90s. So it was probably the biggest account in Los Angeles. And, but I honestly hated the big agency life. It just was very political. And
What did you not like about it?
I'm just not political. I'm very straightforward. I'm like who I am with you right now. I'm this way with clients. I'm this way with everybody. And it's like, when you get to big agencies, sometimes, at least my experience was, it just was very much about my own career and, kind of politicking through. And it's like anti-Stewart. That's just not my personality. I'm not saying it's bad. That just wasn't me. So I actually left the business for a while because my printers were making more money than me, and I was working, 18 hours a day. So I ended up trying to be a salesperson for a commercial real estate company. And from there, actually, fun fact, I was finally going to make it after 4 years of starving. And then the LA riots happened and all my buildings were in the burn area. So
Wow.
all those deals, they didn't burn up, but they crashed. All the buyers got cold feet. So I took a job with a little company doing marketing for individual doctors. And this is like 90s sometime. And I thought, how do you guys make any money doing this? Like, this is crazy. I was to, a piece of an $80 million budget. But it turned out that their model was to have speaking, and I'd never spoken publicly in my life. So it's sink or swim. I had to speak to a group of audience for 3 days and with 5 weeks prep. And I succeeded. I swam. And so I spent the next 10 years, growing to become VP of marketing of that company and speaking around the country. And what was helpful about
Who were
that,
you speaking to at the time?
mostly private practices. So it
Was it like a conference? Like you was your own internal conference?
It was our own seminar. Our own seminar. So, and then I learned then I became the VP of marketing. So I was promoting the seminar. But that experience I tell my team often, it's amazing how helpful that experience was, because I got used to working in an interactive environment for 3 days with a bunch of doctors. So not only did I learn a lot about healthcare, I learned a lot about being good at my feet and communication skills and things like that I wish I could just take this in my brain and give to people, but I can't. But that really helped. That was the basis of what became my company later. So I took a break from that after a while during the internet
Yeah,
age.
because you were doing that for over a decade, I think.
Yeah, for about a decade.
Yeah.
And then during the internet age, the beginning of the internet, I took a break and got into some entrepreneurial things, which were all profitable. I was actually the equivalent of a fractional CMO for a few years there, working for 3 different companies. But I started this company as a hobby and healthcare success. So one of my former colleagues said, "Hey, you want to start a company?" I'm like, "Well, I'm pretty busy, but we'll just see. What if I can create a company," which nobody was doing back then, with nothing more than a website. So I learned about SEO really fast. I learned about paid search really fast. I went to Google. Anybody on this podcast that's a digital native may recognize Google Dance. I was at Google Dance, which was a famous party in the day back in 2006 through 8. So became really good at this stuff. We were doing content marketing before that term was common. We were doing blogs before that term was common. We also went out to some publishers. I went to Dental Economics and they gave me a column. So we went to that. We did a revenue share deal with Medical Economics. And then I started speaking again. So it wasn't all internet based, but that knowledge plus the internet really helped. And so people started calling us really fast. And
talk about the speaking for a second, because you're like, I wish I could just take what I was doing and kind of plug it into someone. What were you doing with those talks that work? Because like now it could be a webinar online. It doesn't have to be to an audience. It could be a webinar online. It could be a piece of content. What were you doing that worked when you were speaking to those audiences?
I think the first thing was I knew what I was talking about. So it was easy. I was already a good marketer and that helped a lot. Some of the others, we had a group of speakers who did this with us. And then we had like breakouts and we had a main session. I eventually became the main session leader too. But some were just reading out of the script. Like they really hadn't done marketing before in any big way, whereas I had. So I had the knowledge to be able to talk broader in between the lines. And I don't know, it's a luck talent thing. There's most things I'm horrible at until I practice, like guitar, for example. But speaking, I was better at than I thought I was. I'm not a technical speaker. I'll still say ums and things like that, but I was able to engage an audience really quickly and relate to them. And I was trustworthy to them and I was interacting with them. And I think part of it was just the practice of being able to interact, because I had figured out my agenda. I knew what I wanted to cover, but in an environment like that, where you have like 15 people, it's small enough to be interactive. So you have to be on your toes. And people during those days, would spend money to come and see me speak for 3 days. And some of them would fight with me. It's like, wait, you spent money to come here. Why are you here? So
what would people fight with you about?
Well, like back then, marketing was thought, good question. So you could do this. Marketing was perceived as unethical, but it was actually illegal until the late 70s. And then it became
For doctors.
Yeah, for doctors.
Yeah.
And it became legal in the early 80s, but they was still considered unethical. And later it became sort of seen as unseemly. To this day, older doctors are usually uncomfortable with marketing, whereas younger doctors have, many less of the qualms. But that, so we would get into this meeting where people would pay to come and learn about marketing. They would fight with me. You can't do this. You can't do that. Especially the psychs, by the way. The psychs were the worst. The people that are supposed to be good at helping you think bigger about your life. Those are the most skeptical, the hardest audience of any of them. So yeah, we did that for a while, but that was just a skill to understand the specialties, to understand and to be good on my feet. It's like to be able to we prepared for this in how many minutes? It's something that's
5 minutes.
I learned how to do. And I wish I could impart that to everybody.
Well, how did you handle those objections? Because there's 15, 20 people. And you have a doctor questioning your authority somewhat in front of a group. How did you handle those objections?
These are fun questions. I don't talk about this much. So first of all, the key is, if you're speaking, to be an authority and to demonstrate that fast and early and hard, right? To have shock and awe. Like, you really need to know your stuff. It makes it a whole lot easier. And so within those opening minutes, partly because of chemistry and partly because I just demonstrated I knew what I was talking about really quickly. So most of the time, people would accept that very quickly. And doctors in particular, as are our audiences, but especially doctors, respect people who are smart. They respect intelligence. And so where you'll get yourself into trouble if you're working with an audience like that, doctors in particular are famous for thinking they know more than everybody else because they're doctors. And so if all you're doing, let's take it out of advertising. Let's say you're a financial planner. And if all you bring to the table is something they could have seen on the Susie Orman, you're going to lose them because like, oh, I'm working my own portfolio, you know nothing. Like you have to know more than they do about your own topic. Otherwise you're going to die. It would be a horrible, awful experience. But if you're expert, then suddenly they're used to learning, their brain will shift and they'll be intrigued. Oh, this is something new. I don't know this. And so that was the secret of really knowing the stuff and being able to communicate that clearly, concisely, and well. And to me, I also had fun with it. I was almost goofy when I did these after I had the opening session. And even, I mean, back in the early days when I was doing this before I had the experience to fall back on, I planned out everything. I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about at which section. And I had a game plan. Later, after about 4 or 5 years of it, I would change everything up on purpose just to keep it interesting to me. But when it was early, I had it all planned out exactly because I want to know exactly where I'm going because you have enough bullets and missiles coming at you anyway. And usually it wasn't antagonistic, but you could be, you know, just like in grade school, there's some kid is always asking questions that are off base or trying to look smart to the rest of the group or sometimes hitting up the rest of the group for business or romance. I've had that. I once had a doctor hit on one of the other attendees, which was very uncomfortable. So, you know, it's like there could be a lot of stuff happen in that environment. And so, and if you don't do a good job of controlling that group, you'll have a very, very long weekend.
Yep. We'll talk about, so healthcare success was kind of like a side thing and how it grew, but I do want to point out for a second, I love what you said there about, so you relate to the audience, you engage with the audience, you also make sure there's interaction, and you also make sure to demonstrate your authority. I did an interview with Oren Klaff, who flipped the script, and he talked a lot about that and how do you create status alignment very quickly. And so that was interesting. So people would check out that interview. So you did this as a side thing. So how did it grow, healthcare success? So
we started off with, I want to back up just because you said something there. The stats was also interesting as we were doing these. So like, for example, little things like the first day I'd wear a suit, the second 2 days I'd wear like khakis because you want to be relatable. Like to that level. Today I just wear whatever I feel like because again, I have the experience. But back then I wanted to make sure I had the credibility of the suit. And then the second 2 days, then otherwise you're setting a barrier between yourself and the audience. Then you're a suit, right? You don't do that either. So it's like all of it's just calculated. Anyway, going back to the healthcare success. So the first thing we did was I went back to a former client and said, hey, I'm doing my own thing. And so he hired us for a little branding creative project, which is like 30 grand. That was like the seed money. That's what we had it from there. I never took out a loan ever. And, you know, we started with a few sort of friends and family we knew would be interested. But the internet stuff started working really fast. I don't remember now. I probably remember it with rose-colored glasses because this was 2006. But because of our, you know, and plus we did our own seminar then. We had the connection with one thing fun we did with medical economics. We recorded audio CDs, instructional audio CDs, and they sold like 100,000. That was my revenue share on that. So they sold couple 100,000 worth of audio CDs. So we would get people.
What was on the audio CDs? What was the topic?
Basically how to market your practice. So we were still doing little doctors back then. We started off like kind of where we left off at the other company. And so people would call me having heard me talk for, you know, essentially 2 days on audio. And so they thought we were a rock star before we even started. So it was really just to sell someone like that because, you know, we're on the same page philosophically. They're finishing my sentences for me. So that helped. But the SEO,
you were actually doing like paid lead generation, right? Because people would buy these CDs, right?
Yeah, that's the model. The seminars too, they always had to pay for it, right? So and it was great because again, you know, by then my CDs, which are still around somewhere, I don't think I have a copy anymore, but
are they digitized? We got
they're audio CDs, so they're out there somewhere. But anyway, that was the start. But the SEO within very short order. I don't remember honestly accurately how long it took, but very short order. We were number one, like worldwide, for healthcare marketing. If you Googled healthcare marketing, we were number one. If you looked at medical marketing, we were number one because nobody was doing this in a very systematic way. So, we were showing up immediately, and we still show up a lot. We're not everywhere as much as we were because there's obviously competition now, but we still are a dominant presence. And so the SEO people started calling us immediately, and even like not just getting the lead, but the credibility for being on number one on Google. Like I was introduced once speaking for Invisalign to all their top doctors. He's this, he's that, and most importantly, he's number one on Google. So it had its own implied credibility.
100%.
And so we did that through, understanding SEO, creating good content. And, to this day, we have thousands of blogs we've done over the years. Our model's changed a little bit. Our target audience certainly has changed. And we had talked a little bit offline. I'll give you a metaphor. So when SEO works, it's like throwing a net into the sea every day, at least for us as a B2B company. It's a little different for B2C. But for us, with this kind of presence, when we get inquiries every single day, there's you get little fish, coming in the net at the end of the day. Sometimes you get a boot, a tree stump, a shark who bites you. Get some fairly good bass, and once in a while you get some whales. But it's really a mixed bag when you're doing online. So you just have to recognize that's part of it. And, over time, it's also very general, right? Because we're a niche company. So it's a very, we get a lot of people that are no longer really fit our target audience anymore, and we refer them out. But it's a very broad net when you do SEO. But it also is huge credibility with us, with our clients, because we get a lot of clients that are looking for great SEO. They find us because we're on top of Google. And so they're already like, okay, can you do it for us what you did for you? I'm like, yeah. So it helps. For sure.
Totally. So it's the inbound part. It's still an important piece. Then talk about the outbound.
Yeah, it's a great point. So the inbound is awesome, and we do a lot of inbound. So we have, as you mentioned, a blog. We're updating a lot of our content. We're in the process of doing our ebooks again. We have a webinar series every 3 weeks right now through spring of next year. We do our own podcast occasionally, which, by the way, ask me about that later if you like. It's all great, and it's all credibility, and it all generates leads. But we also do outbound. And a friend of mine who's a consultant in this category is Corey Quinn. People can look him up. Was a key player at Scorpion and scaling them. And we talk about these things. In fact, I'm on his podcast soon. But we agree philosophically on you need outbound. If really for any business, relying on inbound is great. I love it. But outbound. So currently our outbound is mostly very selectively, like, going back to my seed analogy, right? Like anything healthcare is our target audience, but I don't have time and the scale to go after everybody in healthcare. So instead, we spend a lot of time thinking about exactly who is our most likely target audience that we're really perfect for. And I actually have a bullseye target, which I won't go into too much detail on this public forum, but I have the bullseye of my number one audiences, the next audience, and the third audience. And the third audience, I just let them find us through SEO. Right. So we let the people that are outside of the core audience, they can find us through SEO. But for the core audience, we figure out each of those niches, whether they're providers or hospitals or whatever, and we go after them pretty aggressively. And we want to be in front of them at conferences. We want to be in front of them. We reach out to them, like, for example, if they're private equity backed, we know the private equity company behind them. If they're at a conference, we know who they are. We know who the players are that fit our profile better. We know the investment banker who sold them. We know their accounting firm sometimes. Like, we have enough knowledge of who the players are or the consultants who work in that field. So once you're in that sort of ecosystem and have the credibility, it's a little easier for us. But we're very targeted with that, and that's important. We don't want to go after just anybody because if you have limited resources, you want to go after your A list. And A doesn't necessarily mean the biggest, it means the ones you're best suited for.
Talk about the evolution of your services when you first started, what you offered, and then
These are great questions. This is fun. I haven't thought about this stuff for a while. So when we first started, as I mentioned, we kind of did not a mirror image of what we used to do, a little better image of what we used to do, but it was like we're just getting started. And I'm an entrepreneur, so I just jump in and figure it out. It's a fun fact. One of the people I used to work with tried to do what we did, and she had her office space rented, she had her furniture, she had her filing cabinets with little labels, and she goes, "Wait, I need clients." I did it the opposite way, and we found clients, then we figured it out. So, I mean, seriously, we didn't think of any of that stuff until we had clients to deal with. Then we worried about it. But the back in the day, even though we were doing a lot of digital marketing for ourselves, we did a whole lot of branding, creative stuff. So we would do like brochures and branding and like traditional advertising, because most clients weren't really ready yet for digital. And that transitioned within a few years. And then one of the key things was our old company was very much about, having a good, a thought leadership position and selling them, stuff. And the theory was, they don't want to buy anything after that, just get them started so that they can, go off on their own and prosper. And that's madness. It's a terrible model. And the reason is most clients that we want today are partners. They want a marketing partner that can be with us forever. And it's recurring revenue that I can count on, so I don't have to be out hunting all day. So we changed to a model where we call it a marketing partnership program. Some people call it a retainer, but there needs to be enough commitment on both sides so we can staff it properly. And our model evolved from like giving them a box of stuff, literally sometimes like a bunch of brochures and things, to being a marketing partner. And our model today has evolved completely differently, to where we have very strong account managers who are involved with the strategy, but then we have process experts for paid search, paid social, programmatic, SEO. Local SEO is different. Design, writing, project management, traditional media. Those are all separate people. So our model is completely.
So when you go to services, you could see now under the digital marketing, if you're listening to the audio, there is a we're looking at actually a screen share of healthcaresuccess.com. If you go to services, you have digital marketing, SEO, paid search, social, programmatic display, CTV, content marketing, reputation management, website design. Under marketing strategy and planning, branding, creative services, traditional advertising, multicultural marketing, B2B marketing to doctors, and HCPS, staff training, reporting, analytics. So that's it kind of started off as like branding, like almost like the branding piece, and keep going with what you were saying.
Yeah. So the branding, the creative, and traditional media, probably those three over there. But what was great was we wanted to do more digital, and the world shifted. So we were a little early in to becoming a digital agency. And at one point, we focused so much on digital that we almost thought about being a digital agency only, because the advantage there's pros and cons in this. I told you earlier, we're unique in that we're truly integrated. The problem is getting that team and building that team is insanely difficult. It took us 17 years to get here. So if you're a digital only firm, and I'm, some of our colleagues and competitors on this call, it's really a lot easier to scale. If all you're doing is paid search and SEO, that's really scalable, right? You can only have a key, you get really good at one little sliver and you do it over and over again, and it's more profitable. If you're truly doing all this other stuff, there's a lot of moving parts, so it's a lot harder. So the advantages are, though, that it's a competitive advantage because few people do that. The disadvantages, profitability and mechanics are much harder. So
there's a moat, though.
Yeah,
right.
And so that's actually another thing. So this is just, for those of you on the audio only, showing just some of our team members. Not all of our people want to be on LinkedIn. So some of them are hiding behind the scenes here. I'm sorry, LinkedIn or our website, but these are some of our process experts that are on our team. And I love our people. We've got some great people.
Talk about culture. And I know there was a big shift. I mean, there's a lot of big shifts in healthcare and for your company with the pandemic. But let's just tackle the staff, because you had an office, and how did things shift with the culture and the team?
Yeah.
And we could branch out from there.
Sure. So in 2019, at the end of the year, I made the brilliant decision that I want to scale our company. And I brought in 3 new executives all at the same time at the end of 2019. A new managing partner who in the ad agency business is kind of like a president, a new creative director, and a new director of client service. And COVID happened, like, as you guys know, weeks later. I've only met the creative director one time. That's how this worked. Because a friend of mine is a neuroscientist, and he told me what was happening because he's a scientist. And so we went virtual a week before everybody else did, mostly from duty to try to help slow the virus down. And so we evacuated in the rain with a brand new management team. And culturally, that was brutal because they never really had a chance to understand my company. They never had to understand our culture. And so now we're all virtual. And so it was tough. It was not easy. And I feel like in retrospect, at least I'm pretty convinced at least one or two of those people weren't fits anyway. I'm pretty sure I could have saved at least one of them. But being in a pandemic was really tough. And then, as I joke, when pandemic hit, we never, went to our knees. We went down. We lost some revenue, and we went from profitable to losing a little. But it was, that wasn't the issue. It was really more people. So as I, joke sometimes, we had some nice people who, were not very effective. And we had some effective people who weren't very nice. So we took the opportunity to make a few changes to our team. And we loved everybody, but we had to make the decision we had to make during the pandemic. And but then we just had, like a lot of agencies, just a ton of different things happening with people deciding they want to get out of the business or turnover, people want to go back to grad school. It was just a really tumultuous time. And then I renewed my office space, which was up in May 2021 for a couple of years, actually twice, and nobody wanted to go back. So, and then what we looked around is we had started acquiring virtually because we were virtual. We hired some of our best people were virtual. They could not come into the office. And today, probably half our team, I could say everybody come back to the office, but more than half the team couldn't. And almost everybody we've hired in the last 2 years, some of our best people ever, are all too far to come in. They're in other states. So that's been a challenge, but I'm happy to report at the end of all of this, despite the challenges of having turnover, like I said, like a lot of people did during the pandemic, despite going virtual, culturally, we're back. Like we're kind of where we want to be.
What do you do to maintain culture now virtually?
So by the way, it's never enough. I wish we could do more. We fly everybody in twice a year. First of all, we have a summer party and we have a holiday party. So that actually helps. People really like that. We also have a wrap-up meeting that we do most Friday afternoons. And sometimes they're just simple shout outs. Sometimes we do video games or games led by different team members. We also, for those of them people that are local, we have events sometimes at my house, something informal, or sometimes we'll go on hikes together or whatever, or go to the beach. So for the people who are local, it's a little easier. We also, benefits-wise, has one of the things that's been really helpful for us. We have 3 weeks of PTO to start. We also have all major holidays on top of that. And then on top of that, every month you get at least 1 3-day weekend. So on the weekends where there's no formal holiday, we have an additional Friday off, and our employees love that. We work really, really hard. Oh, and then on top of all that, we have a holiday break for a week, a week off during Christmas and New Year's. So our team loves that, and I think they're really appreciative of that. And so that said, it's never over, right? And it's really easy to feel isolated. And I was just talking to one of our employees the other day over lunch. Oh, I also do lunches. I have an open schedule with my team, and I have lunches almost once a week with various team members. Usually they request it, sometimes I request it of them. But even one of my biggest advocates for being digital was telling me, well, now I'm a young parent and I'm feeling a little lonely. It's like, so you have to do this stuff. And so, those beers and tacos with employees are every bit as important as anything else we do. And we do that to the extent we can. It's not perfect, and it's harder with the virtual team for sure.
Yeah, we've seen that too. Some people actually they're getting lonely at their house working, and they want to go in somewhere and be with people.
We were thinking about, I just did a poll. I would do it. There's some cool workspace out there, especially if the workspace was next to a restaurant. Like our old space was beautiful, and you can see pictures of it on our website. If you look around, you can poke around and find it. We had a beautiful space. But nobody wanted to go there, and not being next to a restaurant is a deal killer today with so many office spaces. if you have to get in a car to go to a restaurant for lunch, it's just a deal killer for me anyway. So we looked at some cool, very cool, modern hip space, but I'm not going to spend even at half the space we used to have, $10,000 or $15,000 to be there by myself. That's stupid. So until I get a groundswell of people really are serious about going back, we won't. But if somebody wants to go to WeWork or whatever, we can.
Yeah, I've heard there's been a few that have been saying that's what they're doing. They're just getting a membership to co-working space and people can go if they want to go, type of thing. You mentioned growth and like your bullseye target. And I love how you talked and broke down about knowing the different players in the space. And we were chatting before we hit record on growth. And one of those things, it's almost counterintuitive of what you're saying, which is the way you're able to grow is you're saying no a lot more. Can you just dig a little deeper
for sure.
into
That is a lesson I'd heard for years, even from my CPA, who's not a normal CPA. My CPA built the largest independent accounting firm in Southern California by buying 100 accountants. So he's not a normal guy. And even he told me that, it's going to be really hard for you. You're going to want to like do whatever comes across the door, but you'll never get anywhere if you do that. And it took us forever to learn that lesson. I don't know. I was just stubborn and stupid on that. And finally, not very long ago, we had a client that just was a horrible fit and was antagonistic from the beginning and was a small client for us. And again, when I say these things, I'm being sort of very informal. I'm not being disrespectful in the least, but when you take on a client that's too small for your roster, it's a challenge because to them, it's a lot of money. And to you, it's not enough to really service properly. So who wins in that equation? Nobody. So it's not like I'm being greedy. It's just I needed to have enough revenue to support it to the way they're happy. And if they're not, they don't fit that category. I really do want to help everybody. There's a teacher in me. I really do want to be a servant leader and help everybody, but I just figured out I can't. And so today, it's part of the reason why we do content is when somebody's too small for us to service, we're like, read our blog. It's fantastic. And we know, some like sort of freelance guys who do stuff that we refer to once in a while for those guys, because it just, like my people are all six figures. They're all expensive. And nobody, so far, nobody yet is in 17 years has offered to volunteer for a client. So they all have to be paid, right? And, I always talk about that. It's like, so there's no volunteers in my team. So it's like, when we get these phone calls, like, well, I'll pay you on commission based upon results. Like, yeah, no, can't do that. So it's like, it really comes down to finding, clients that and also, like I said, it's like where the pedigree of what we've done matches what they are is the first layer, because it's easier to convince them. It's easier to service them. And we work with people outside of that layer all the time. But, again, if you're going to focus your energies on outbound, focus it on who you really want. I would like to actually mention something, to promote you guys and what you're doing on the podcast. So we've done podcasts as well. And so when we do podcasts, I'm not active on that right now as much as I was. But when we do, we reach out to people we want to do business with, or at least know. And so,
yeah, you've had people from the Cleveland Clinic on your podcast. You've had some impressive.
So like that's a great example. So even on Cleveland Clinic, who we haven't done business with directly, one of my favorite guests from Cleveland Clinic, I've had multiple, is Jim Merlino. He's a longtime friend, and we're friends, and we're lifelong friends that came out of that. And so, we're able to share knowledge at the highest level with our audience. And Jim's a fascinating guy. We have lots of people like that. And so, sometimes when we do the podcasts, it's, for outbound, and once in a while it doesn't result in business. It does happen, but it's part of the aura of the whole thing and creating really good content. Like, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I'm pretty confident in our content is really at the front end of the pack there. It's like, maybe not number one, but it's pretty good. And so the top 90th percentile for sure. And so that's how you get a good following, and it just makes everything easier, right? I'm not saying other people don't do good content, they do, but ours, we have a high standard of quality. And that's actually, as we've evolved, back in the day, it was about quantity. I went to plug for Bruce Clay, if you're SEO aficionado. I went to Bruce Clay's training in Simi Valley. He's kind of like the godfather of SEO. And back then, that's how we learned about SEO, through Bruce back in the day. Their comment there was, if you're doing a blog a week, do 2. If you're doing 2 blogs a week, do 4. If you're doing 4 blogs, do 8. So it was really about quantity.
Kind of like a personal trainer for your SEO.
Yeah. So we we bought into that, and we were doing 4 or 5 blogs a week. Now we do one thoughtful blog a week, and then or some piece of premium content every week. So we'll do an ebook or a blog or whatever, but it's more thoughtful, it's less frantic, and it's smarter and it's better. So,
Stewart, I have one last question. I really appreciate your time, sharing your journey, your leadership, your thoughts on culture. It has been really valuable. Last question is just resources. What resources have you found valuable over the years? It could be a book, a podcast. It could be just a person, like you mentioned, Bruce Clay. What are some resources people should check out that you've learned from?
It's funny. That's hard, like top of mind. It's hard. I've got a whole library over here. I could kind of go look through them.
Yeah,
but,
list a few of your
I got
favorites.
started with, I did a lot of personal development actually in the day. And so I did one of those sort of California seminars where everybody hugs each other at the end. And I did Tony Robbins and, Zig Ziglar and all that. Brian Tracy. My wife and I to this day quote Brian Tracy. What was this thing he always says?
Eat that frog?
No, it's like Brian Tracy's was like, leaders work hard. I've got to get back to work. That's it. So lots of that sort of stuff. Today, a lot of the stuff I learned from is, I'm just voracious online, and I mentioned Corey Quinn starting his own thing. There's a fair number of blogs that are leading blogs, like for David C. Baker and Drew McClellan. Have agency blogs on how to create successful agencies. Carl Sakis is another guy. So, I still read books, but the online stuff is just so much. I had on my podcast, the conversion doctor, I'm spacing on his name at the moment, last week. So I also will interview people I think are smart, right? And so, that's a way to keep learning. The books, I read books on the books I'm reading today, usually on marketing, are not on marketing. The marketing books, the marketing stuff is available and happening so fast online that there's just so many blogs out there that we read. I look at LinkedIn increasingly. We have a bigger presence on LinkedIn too. And then so today I'm mostly interested in scaling and leadership. And it's funny you mentioned that word leadership. I started this, I was a total entrepreneur, and I had always, this might be helpful to your listeners. I had always, since 1988, when J. Walter Thompson, or 1990, whenever I left there, I haven't had a real job since. So, I got into commercial real estate. And then when I was doing the speaking, I was technically an employee, but I was really my own sort of unit, my own business unit. And then I got, the various things I've done, I've been very entrepreneurial. So I started this company with a partner and bought him out a few years later, but I learned how to manage on the job, and that wasn't easy. If I had to do it over again, I might have stayed in the corporate hierarchy a little longer to learn stuff the easy way on somebody else's dime, because it's really hard being an entrepreneur and not having any really good management experience. That wasn't easy. But I have learned over the years experientially, and things like, for example, I've been told by mentors forever, hire slow and fire fast, and I would do the opposite. So that's a very, very expensive lesson, right? Because then if you hire the wrong people and keep them on your team, it's demotivated to the players. And so, I'm a bonehead in that way. I've had to learn a lot of things that people told me. I had to learn it experientially myself. So if you've heard these kind of things before and you're not doing them, trust me, it'll be easier if you finally listen to people who are giving you this advice than going it the hard way.
I love it.
That was helpful to you.
Yeah, Stewart, thank you. Everyone check out healthcaresuccess.com to learn more. You can check out the resources, their blog. And Stewart, I'm going to be the first one to thank you. Thanks, Stewart.
Thanks
everyone.
for having me. By the way, I'm easy to find. Link into me if you want. And great, nice meeting you. And best wishes to you and everybody else. Thanks.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.